Hi and welcome back to the channel, and in this episode let's keep going with the metalwork on this Mark II Escort. A couple of hours of mucking around, making up plates and welding everything up, and that is the right hand side A-pillar or door pillar and the inner sill sorted out. So that's all that rust repair done. A bit further along and more rust repairs done. The scuttle panel is now all done. This is actually made in two pieces. So the crescent shaped section first was fitted in there, and then this sort of piece underneath is a flat piece that was bent around, welded up, file finished. It is just a little bit lower than the factory panel, and I've done that deliberately. That will need just a very fine smear of bog in there to get that all to match up to the factory panel, and that's all good. And then in the rear, the same thing with the rear quarter where it was rusted out in the base of the C-pillar. Very commonplace for these to be rusted in Escorts. So that's all done, and same again, that's all just rough finished at the moment, and then it'll need to be primed and then have some filler in there when we go to do the panel work. So the next section to tackle is this section here, which is also very common in the bottom of the rear quarters and into the wheel wells. However, as you can probably see here, I've got a trace mark on here already. I've got to, that was just a very rough trace of the forest arches just to see where it sat. I have to set that out properly. It does mean that a great deal of this section here, well, in fact, all of that section there is going to be removed. So that saves me a whole bunch of rust repairs there, and then I just need to concentrate just on the back corners there. And there's a bit on the inside as well of the wheel arch, nothing unusual with these. There's also a couple of little bits on the right sill to do, but for the most part, the rust repairs are pretty much sorted now. It's a cold winter's morning in here today. However, let's get going with these forest arches. So, the deal is with these arches that I have already temporarily screwed them into place, both sides. It's kind of crazy really, because this is a brand new rear quarter here, and then I'm going to cut it up. So basically the way that it works is I've got to measure it all up and get it all in roughly the right place, and just check the measurements left to right. I've done the right side already in terms of just getting that sorted out, and then I'm just going to trace around this with a marker pen to give us the outside line of where the arch will sit. And then what we need to do is remove these arches. Oh, just a section there. Right, need to remove the arch and then mark out a strip about 25mm inside all the way around and cut that out, and that will be where the inner arch or the tub for the inside will fit, and the outside of it we can then sort it all out. Alright, so we're going to mark a 25mm strip on the inside of this, cut it out. We've got a fair bit of rust in this corner here, so I'm glad we're going to be getting rid of that at the same time. Cutting this all out is one thing. Cleaning it all up and getting all the tar off, particularly from the inner arch, is another thing. So that is the inner arch all trimmed out as well, and all cleaned up, ready to go. I do need to get a bit more steel to make up the tubs or the inner arches. In the meantime, this panel has also been sorted out at the base of the rear quarter where it was all rusted out there. Had to make up a little panel for that and then fold it up to fit in there because up underneath the wheel well, or the bottom of the wheel well there was also all rusted out. No surprises with these Mark IIs. So now let's get stuck into the left side, cutting it out. Should be a little bit easier on that side because the inner arch has already been removed. Some simple strips cut, flat strips cut from panel steel for the inner arch or the tubs. I could have bought these prefabricated. There are ones available for them. However, you've got to get them absolutely spot on to be right. Depending where the arch is mounted, and there's a few nuances in its alignment and things like that, just easier to get some strips of steel. I'll get these spot welded in. I've got temporary screws holding them in at the moment just to make sure that that is in pretty good alignment. Once that's sorted out, then it'll be a matter of moving on to the outside, and it'll be stitched on the outside and then seam sealed, because that will all live underneath the actual forest arch itself. That is the inner arch or tub on the right hand side, pretty much done now. It's all sort of welded into place. Got a fair bit of tidy up work to do around the seams just to get that all okay. It is spot and stitch welded in. It's not fully welded. Again, from factory, they're not fully welded. They are spot welded in. There'll be plenty of sealant inside and out. And it is welded on both sides, so you can get on the inside through here without too much grief, and then into the boot here as well to reach that arch, so that all works out pretty well. Something to note here is that they are curved outwards, so there is a bit of finessing to do there, and there's still a bit of tidy up to do with this. I've just got to see where that forest arch sits on there now, as to how much clean up this needs and how much tidy up it needs. If it doesn't need too much, we'll just take the lumps off it there mostly and get it well sealed, primed and well sealed, and then get the forest arch over the top. A very quick refit test to just check and see what the gap looks like, to make sure that there's no fouling welds anywhere. Spot on. So only needs a little bit of tidy up on the welds. Nothing serious, which is great, and it can be sealed up. Good news. There is still one more piece I need to cut out and weld in the bottom of the inner sill there in the boot well, and I'll sort that out as well. Right side all done. time to turn my attention to the left side. Now I thought this would go pretty straightforward, being a new rear quarter and all that sort of stuff. However, it ended up being just as time consuming, if not a bit more, to get this one sorted out. So the first place that's obviously the most obvious is inside the boot, the spare wheel well. Basically on the chassis side here had been completely rusted out, as well as the whole rear quarter, so that all came out at that time, and did have notions of potentially making a new tub or reverse tub in there, like a tray for the spare wheel well. However, it really isn't worth it. We're not running a spare wheel in there, and therefore there's no point. So instead, a relatively flat plate has gone in. When I say relatively flat, because it has got a very slight curve in it. It is curved in a couple of directions there, and then it had to be profiled to meet in with the inner wheel wells or the tubs. So that's all been welded into place, primed, and then sealed. Moving on to the outside of the car, or the inside, whichever way you look at it, and the inner tubs or inner arches are now complete. Now this actually turned out to be a little bit more of a drama than I had anticipated, because what had happened was the actual forest arches, I'd fixed them over the top, temporarily screwed them on, and then marked everything out, ready to go. And then I discovered that one of the arches had a dent in it, quite a considerable dent in it actually, that I hadn't picked up originally. You don't expect that with brand new stuff. I think it had actually happened in transit, in freight, somewhere that something maybe wasn't quite packed right, and it had dented the arch. So I then had to knock that dent out of the arch. Wasn't too bad, thankfully. However, it did change the profile of the arch slightly, and that then affected where I had intended to put everything in here. And by that time, I already had the inner arch panel in place and tacked in. And then when I went and fixed the dent and then put the arch on the outside, I then realized that here there was a gap of about 5 to 10 mil in this corner, which was a bit of a drama. So I had to cut the tacks off. Luckily there was enough metal there to move it all out, get it in the right spot, and re-stitch it all into place. So it took a little bit longer than I anticipated. Obviously now we've got all the sealant in there. It's drying at the moment. Didn't show you that on camera. It's not that exciting to watch, just basically running out beads of sealant and then smoothing that out. So we'll let that all dry, and then the next stage we'll be able to actually fit the arches to the car on both sides, which will be kind of exciting, just to get a bit more of the actual Group 4 or rally sort of stuff done. That is, after a considerable amount of work, the rear forest arches all fixed into place permanently. There is one last step to go, and that'll happen. Really, that's a preference by the owner or the customer, that they would like to see the no defined body line on these. So we will put a thin amount of filler just around that edge there, and also smooth off over the rivets, so that the seams are all hidden. That will come along. We've got plenty of other places where we need to put a little bit of filler here and there, so we'll worry about that when we get to that point. But finally, that's both of those done, and the rear quarters and sections of the car sorted out. Right, with the rear arches and finally the rust repairs out of the way, we can get on to building this into a rally car now. So let's get on to the start of some of the work in the rear end. There's quite a bit that needs to be done in here. Thankfully there's a lot of fabricated bits, however it does still require a bit of cutting and welding and other work to fettle it all out. So the first thing to tackle is a problem that was known about since probably the late 60s. A bit of a curious one, this one. Involves these parts here. This is a rear turret. Now, the reason that we are going to put these in is actually to do with the productions of the Mark 1 and the Mark 2s and the compromises that were made to, well, they were effectively a road car. It's got to do with the rear suspension geometry. A live rear axle presents its own problems in the way that they handle. And on top of that, basically Ford designed the rear ends of these cars to have a rear damper or rear shock absorber on an angle. So instead of being perpendicular, perfectly upright to the rear axle, instead they were actually designed with a bit of camber, negative camber. They're tipped inwards. And it was discovered in the 1960s or the early 1970s when they were rallying these things that after a while the shock absorbers just started overheating. The damper angles weren't particularly correct for gravel rallying, and in the end the works drivers were finding that the cars were becoming almost undrivable. So Ford engineers developed this solution, which was to basically remove the factory shock absorber angles, get rid of those and use these instead. So what happens is these will sit inside up against the rear wheel arches, and this allows a shock absorber, a longer shock absorber to go in the rear of the car, so a larger dampening force, and also instead of having an angle it'll be straight, which gives a much more linear motion to the rear axle and helped drastically with traction and handling in these cars. Now, back when I started rallying in the 1990s, under the Motorsport Australia, which was then CAM's rules, we weren't allowed to run rear turret kits in there. You had to run with the factory shock absorbers, and so you had to learn to drive around the problem. Luckily, back then our rallies weren't long enough to overheat the dampers. However, while we have the opportunity, particularly because the roll cage can be tied into these turrets, we're going to fit them into this car and get them sorted out now. So it's going to involve a fair bit of cutting and welding and filthy mess. And while we're at it, another addition that will go in the rear end at the same time is this. Doesn't look like much, just basically folded metal, but basically this is a cover over the rear of the transmission tunnel to provide more space for a larger rear axle. Again, all of these bits that were in here were a compromise that were made initially by Ford because they needed to, it was a four-door car or a four-seater car, and so therefore had a back seat and rear seat passengers. So all of this sort of stuff which we're putting into the rally car would have taken up valuable space when it was a road car. So obviously nobody's going to be in the rear of the car anymore, so we can fit this stuff in. Time to get the angle grinder out again. It might not be that easy to see in this light, but there is the turret for the right hand side in the car. And that's what it looks like inside the wheel arch. The tub, there was a bit of mucking around to get this welded in. It's quite an involved job. They're not easy to position them and get them in place. You can understand why the Escort Bible, the factory document, says get somebody else to do it, because it is a lot of work to get them sorted out correctly. And that's what it looks like looking from the front. As you can see, I've been using a jig to help hang this to get it in the right spot. Welding it in is not too bad, but getting it positioned right and the amount of stuff that you need to cut out is quite involved. Also, to make matters worse, started cutting this out and there was a bit of rust under the tar on the in the tub, so that needed a bit of mucking around as well to get that sorted out. There's a couple of patches in there that needed to be put in. So still got the left side to go, haven't got that far with it all yet. I'll need to cut out the top of the parcel shelf like I have done on the right hand side. And yeah, even though these are supposedly ready to go, right to fit sort of thing, they're not. There's a fair bit of mucking around and a bit of trimming up to get these things in. They they don't go straight in even though they're profiled. So just be aware, if you are going to fit turrets to the car, these pre-made turrets are not quite just drop them in and weld them in sort of thing, or certainly not these ones that we've got anyway. And they are quite difficult because of the shapes. They are tapered and they are rounded, they're not square. It's quite hard to find a datum point on it, so we had to do a fair bit of lateral thinking to get these in. Anyway, that's that one done. The left hand side one should hopefully be hopefully a bit quicker, but still there's still quite a lot of hours in there. Now just going to give this a quick clean up and vacuum around it, and then get some weldable primer over it. To give you some idea of how this has gone together, I've spent a lot of time doing this off camera already. This is the jig setup, and look at that, managed to get it to 0, 0, 0, 0, so she's nice and level. And then basically using engine stand or engine support stand bracing, these rods here are actually down to a datum point on the axle where we needed to set it up, and got those in 90 degrees, so they're perpendicular, got them to the right points on the axle, and then done a heap of measurements in all directions to make sure that these are in the right places, and have already got the holes cut for these to sit in down to the chassis rails. And this is what it looks like on the inside. So basically that rod there, the camera's probably not picking it up that well, but it is vertical, it's hanging it perpendicular to the axle, and we've got a temporary clamp on there as well. Use threaded rod because it allows us to get the heights, so we can bolt it in and also tighten it up to the jig, to the bracing in there, to make sure that it's all good. A whole bunch more measurements have been taken before we weld this in. So the key with this stuff is to make sure that preparation has been done, and lots of it, and check everything and check everything and check everything before you start welding it in to make sure that it is correct. Now once we've got that done, there is going to be a fair bit of trimming work. As you can see here, there is a large amount of metal there that's got to be removed. We could leave that in, however there is a chance that the tyres, when they move up and down, could foul on that potentially. So once it's welded into place, then that'll all be cut out and trimmed off. Like I said, with the right hand side one, there is quite a lot of extra work that's required to get these things in. It's not just a quick, unfortunately, a quick job to get it in. A while later, and that is the left hand turret all sorted, so that's both sides done now. There was a couple of places as I was welding here, a bit like the other side, there was some little rust holes that I found in there, so I started welding them up. So there's a few places I had to spot it up, which weren't the neatest welds in there. There's also a bit of tar and smoke that comes out from underneath, and they've cleaned it, that does occasionally get in the weld. That was particularly noticeable trying to get these ones done here on the original factory shock absorber tower. There, I've done the seam welds on here to stiffen this up, and there's a lot of sealant in there, so it's very difficult to get clean welds, and that's quite common when you're doing seam welding. Okay, things are beginning to take shape now, which is great. I didn't film this because you've seen enough of me cutting and grinding and welding, but now the rear diff section, or the rear section of the tunnel, has been chopped out and this new panel put in. Still got to make up a little section to go in here, and then now it's time to start looking at getting the rear firewall in, and then it'll be time for a cage. Saturday morning, it's always good to be working on a weekend, and onto another task. So because the roll cage is going to be mounted off of the turrets, it's a good idea now to get the firewall or the rear bulkhead in the car. We need to have a fuel-proof and flame-proof bulkhead in there, because directly behind this, the fuel tank is going to be sitting. So we need to make sure that nothing's going to get through there to meet the regulations. Now, this particular rear bulkhead has been butchered at some point in its past really badly, like the speaker holes have been cut nastily, drilled and hammered to make a hole. So we're going to have to make up plates for all that. this actual sheet here is aluminium. Customer managed to get that, and it was nice that it's actually bent up to sort of the right shape. So at the moment it's just temporarily tech screwed in just to give us an idea of how it's all going to fit. And we're going to have to make up some plates to go in here to seal this section up, fix up all this. We'll sort out all those back factory holes there. I'll show you how we do that when we get to that. A bit further along, and that is the plates set for the corners. This all here will be all covered up by the firewall once we've got it all installed. So stitch welded. What will happen is that once we've got everything in place, then we'll fill all of these up with sealant. There's no point fully welding all this. It's really just to support the parcel shelf, but it does add a bit of stiffness. This was all flapping around in the breeze where it was all cut and damaged and massive holes. So the next thing is to then sort out this top section here to patch up that hole there and get that under control, and then the firewall section can go on. It's a bit convoluted, but it will do the job, and it will seal everything up and make it all tight. Okay, another couple of hours on, and the rear bulkhead is pretty much done. So we had to make up some plates there to fix up those horrendous speaker hole messes that were in the rear parcel shelf. So that's all been done and stitched into place. We've also got the rear bulkhead, which is actually aluminium, temporarily screwed in. That will need to be drilled and riveted into place. Being aluminium, we won't be able to weld that in. There is still quite a bit of sealant to go around and seal all this stuff up. However, we won't do any of that yet. It'll wait until after the roll cage is in, purely because if we start putting too much sealant and things in places, the heat is going to affect it. There's still plenty of welding to be done where the cage is going to be tied in and things like that. So that will happen afterwards. However, it has got enough now to get the cage done. So that is our progress so far, and I think that's probably where we'll end this video. However, we will keep on working on the car regardless, and get some updates in some future videos with that. Okay, so we are getting some serious progress done on this thing finally, which is great to see. We need to get the roll cage in now. That is a major step, and once we've got that done, that will be one big item ticked off the list. Hope you've enjoyed our progress so far on the build of the Mark II Escort. Please give us a thumbs up. It's important for the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe, and we'll catch you again soon. Cheers.